Hello, everybody, and welcome to another TFE Live. I'm your host, Tom Ehman. We're live in studio today from San Francisco, again at the Beach Street Yacht Club, where it is a gorgeous day for our 267th show on the 25th of February 2020, Fat Tuesday. And I think the people in the studio with me are not quite celebrating it yet, but perhaps they will. I want to welcome Julia Wedekind, who's, of course, our coordinating producer, is always with us. Hello, Julia.
Hello.
And sitting in the hot seat today, John Bertrand, not a U.S., USA.
Yeah.
American
Thanks.
John Bertrand. Welcome, JB.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here.
Nice to have you here. Any hot tips before we get started?
First off, you and Julia should be congratulated for an incredible show that you've put together and the audience you've built. It's really fun. A lot of times I'm in Europe when I'm coaching or down under, and I'm able to tune in and see a lot of friends that are tuning in as well.
Good. Well, we appreciate that very much. Julia?
Fantastic.
Yes.
No better time?
It's no better time to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. And the sharing makes a lot of difference. And our audience is growing because you've been doing it. So thank you.
I think we got to get the color, the white balance of this long shot camera is not correct. It looks a little too blue, doesn't it? Is that better? On the fly audio visual. And if you're so inclined, go over to the main website, sailingillustrated.com, and become a patron via Patreon. We appreciate that very much. You can also join us via PayPal if you want to do PayPal, and that's just paypal.me/sailingillustrated. Today, as I mentioned, is Fat Tuesday. It's being celebrated, of course, in New Orleans, where it is the final day of Mardi Gras. In fact, I didn't know this, guys. Maybe you knew this. Mardi Gras actually means
Fat Tuesday.
Fat Tuesday.
Yes.
Did you know that, John?
No, did not.
I didn't either. Julia, go ahead.
No, it's absolute French.
Absolute.
Yeah.
Absolute. And Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, refers to the events of the Carnival celebration, of course, this time of the year, famously in New Orleans, but also in Rio and a number of other cities around the world, beginning on or after the Christian feast of Epiphany, the Three Kings Day, and culminating on the day before, tomorrow, Ash Wednesday, which is known in some parts of the world as Shrove Tuesday as well. Mardi Gras is French for Fat Tuesday, reflecting the practice of the last night of eating rich, fatty foods before the ritual Lenten sacrifices and fasting of the Lenten season. Related popular practices are associated with Shrovetide celebrations before the fasting and religious obligations associated with the penitential season of Lent. In countries such as the United Kingdom, with a lot of viewers in the United Kingdom, Mardi Gras is also known as Shrove Tuesday. Did you know that?
Yes.
Lady and gentlemen. I didn't either. That's why you tune in here. There's always lots to learn on TFE Live.
And there's one other thing. It's a good excuse to have a Sazerac.
Is that right?
Yes.
Is that what you're having tonight?
Yes, indeed.
You promise?
Promise.
Okay. So much for Fat Tuesday and Shrove Tuesday. Let's thank our guest who was on here. I can take off that dollar thing, can I? Thank our guest who was here on last Friday's show. She was a terrific guest, Lijia, Golden Lily Zhu, who's originally from Shanghai and now living in Great Britain, the Olympic gold medalist in the radial class, laser radial class 2012. She was a terrific guest. And Julie, we've got her book.
Just got it.
It arrived in the mail yesterday.
Yep.
Speaking of.
I flipped through it, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. She's so terrific. I look forward to it.
John, you must know her, don't you?
Yeah, well, I watched her medal race in London, and it was really, really impressive. And that's where she won the gold medal, was in that final race.
It was indeed, and she is just an articulate, bright human being who's turning her attention to broadcasting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she'll do it very well.
And she did sail GP last year in the sound booth in London at Whisper Studios doing the Mandarin commentary, because, of course, there's a China team.
Yeah.
There's a SailGP Team China. So she's terrific. I can't say enough about her. And thanks again to John Emmett for teeing that up. And that show has had, last I checked, Julie, which is a couple hours ago, 6.2 thousand
I
views.
just looked at it, but I forgot it's over 6,000.
And what are you hearing, speaking of views, Clark Chapin, our statistician, our Sailing Illustrated TFE Live statistician, sent us some stats that were routinely now getting well over, 3,000, 3,500
Yeah.
views, and okay,
Yeah.
these are not Justin Bieber numbers, but
No, but I mean, but the rate is going straight up, sort of,
well, it is the
which is
curve.
really fun.
It's a hockey stick curve, they call that in
Oh,
statistics.
thank you.
I'm serious.
Yeah,
As
all
an
right.
old hockey player, one knows those things.
Yes.
Look at the mess on my desk here. I got my book out. I got my we got to get rid of. Got to clean our act up here, Julia.
There you go.
The truth is, I was in the. This is the A block that we're in now, and we'll continue. I just want to, and then we'll tell you about what's happened this morning in terms of breaking news. I'm sure you all know, but for those of you who still struggle, as JB, you mentioned this as well, the struggle to find our videos, and they're all on, and now not in one place, but in two places, or at least most of them are. All of them are on our Facebook page. If you go there and you go, I use the Telestrator for the first time in a while. You go there and see over here on the left where it says videos. Click on that on our Sailing Illustrated Facebook page, and all those videos pop up. It's as simple as that. Now, so again, just using that videos tab there on the left. Now you can also go to our Sailing Illustrated TV YouTube page. Same thing. All of them pop up, not necessarily in the order. In fact, not in the order that they aired necessarily, although that will start to work out. It's in the order that I post them. And I'm going back and grabbing like the Leo Takahashi show, which was very popular. You can see I posted that 2 days ago. That's there. Long story short, you can go to either of those pages. But if you just Google TFE Live, see what the first top 5 things are that pop up: the website, the Facebook page, and YouTube. So it's real easy. Just Google TFE Live, and it up pops all those videos.
And if you're technological savvy enough, you can watch it from your computer on YouTube and widescreen visual color. It's great fun to do that.
Well, you can watch it on your television set if your
Yeah.
TV
Yeah.
is linked up as you did last night.
Right.
I was pleased that to see that. Okay, let's carry on. You can simply Google, in summary, TFE Live, and up will pop all that stuff. In studios, you've already seen as our VIP guest, long time friend from the 80s, world champion in the laser class. What year?
Laser class and fin.
And the fin class.
Yeah.
Double world champion.
Two times laser, one fin.
So triple world champion. Yeah. And, of course, the silver medalist in 1984 in Long Beach in the fin class. Our good friend JB, John Bertrand, is here. In fact, he's back. John, this is not your first time here at this rodeo.
I think it was in the spring. So I've been to Europe and Australia and Japan and other areas.
In fact, you're just back from Australia, aren't you? You've been
back.
Down at Melbourne for the NACRA and the FX and the 49er.
Well, I was actually coaching at the laser, and if you know Melbourne, you've got Sandringham, which is south of Melbourne. The FX, the 49er, and the NACRA were on the other side of the bay in Geelong.
And Geelong, yeah.
Yeah, so totally different conditions.
Beautiful city, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful, and it's great being down there.
It's one of Julia's favorite cities too. Yeah. Of course, you're just partial to Australia, aren't you?
I am. I am. And I go to Sydney and the.
Yeah. Well, I went to Sydney as well, and I couldn't see it.
Because of the haze, the smoke?
Yeah. When we flew in, it was so smoky that it was actually, sometimes where you kind of smell the smoke. It was to the point where it was like you were smoking in, and then when you're breathing out, you tasted it as well. It was incredible. And one other story about that. I drove a coach boat from Sydney to Melbourne.
You did?
Which is a 9-hour drive. It's kind of like Highway 5.
Oh, highway, not on the water.
Yeah.
Bloody hell, yeah.
No, it's a straight shot.
That would be a long drive on the water.
For 8 of those hours, it was smoky. That's like driving from San Francisco to San Diego.
Yeah.
And it was heavy smoke the whole way. So it was really sad to kind of see what was going on down there. And it did affect the sailing as well. So.
Well, speaking of Australia, we met really during the 80. We met before that, but we got to know each other well during this campaign for the America's Cup. This is actually the 12-meter Worlds in Frio, one of my favorite photos, sailing photos, yacht racing photos of all time. That's the 86 Worlds. John, you were the tactician on USA 42, which is there in second place, I guess, in that race.
Yep.
And John Coleus was the skipper. Tell us a little bit about that series.
Oh, well, it was it was spectacular. I mean, sailing 12 meters off of Fremantle in those conditions was epic. Um, and the 12 meters pretty much kind of go around the race course at the same speed. So you can see that we're, going down the first reach and we're all lined up. It was the first time that they ever had a world championships for the class. And it was also the first time for all the teams to line up and see what's what. And probably the biggest, news going on there was the Plastic Fantastic boats from New Zealand. So that was the first fiberglass 12 meter to show up, and they looked very impressive.
And there it is in K. Well, I'll go back to the tight shot. There's KZ with the blue and yellow kite there, second from the left, to windward of you all. And they were Chris Dixon was driving those boats. Sir Michael Fay now was the head of that program. Was the leader of the pack. And that was New Zealand's first America's Cup challenge. And look at them now. They're the only country that's won it, lost it, and won it back. Mm-hmm. But that world championship was fabulous for a lot of reasons. And the winner of the ultimate winner of the 87 America's Cup was not there.
Yeah, not there.
Training in Hawaii. DC, he's not in this list here. He's not in these pictures because he was training in Hawaii, right. John.
Well, I think you and I can take a little credit for DC winning the America's Cup.
Well,
because I'll tell you why. Because we were the first one down there with the New York Yacht Club in America too, and Ian Murray and Peter Gilmore they had Kookaburra, and we had our sheds right next to each other.
Yeah.
And I think they were spying on us, and they maybe thought, well, we should copy some of the ideas that we put forward. And as it turned out, Dennis just cleaned everyone's clock with his big fast boat.
The big boat.
And we were going small.
And smaller.
Yeah, smaller.
I mean, of our three boats, let's tell. Well, I don't know if we've ever told the truth on this, but the fastest boat was the first one.
The first one.
The boat sailing in this series was USA 42, and then the late great Billy Langan, who was our designer, the boats decided that he needed to make the boat smaller. And of course, I'm out raising money, and we raised the on what was then the ungodly sum of $16 million. Yeah. So did Dennis. We were the two probably best funded teams, and we raised that money. And of course, having raised that money, we had to tell the donors, well, we're going to keep building boats, and once we built them, we couldn't very well tell the donors, well, these are slower than the first one, could we?
Well, we sailed well because there were 3 months of trials, and the final trials was like triple points.
Yep.
And going into the final trials, we either had the second or third best record. And then when we got to December, it got windy.
Yep.
And our boat was low profile.
Indeed.
And we actually couldn't go downwind without washing our guys off the deck. We couldn't even take the jib down. So it was really sad.
And that was 46 by then.
That was 46.
Yeah. Okay. Fond memories of what many people call the best America's Cup regatta in the history of the sport, the 86, 87 Worlds, and then the Cup, which was 34 years ago. The Worlds were 34 years ago this month, and the Cup was, of course, in 87, so 33 years ago this month, off Fremantle, Western Australia, in Gage Roads. And the reason it's Gage Roads is because it's between the beach, between Frio, and remember the island just offshore?
Yeah,
Rat's Nest. Remember the late, great Arthur Wolschlager used to call it some other things.
Yeah.
Did you ever go out to Rat Nest?
I never did, but it's spectacular. It's a tourist
It's full
spot.
of rats, too, right?
Apparently.
It is. Okay.
There's also another island that's full of sharks circling around it.
Yeah, well.
Right looking for the rats to eat. I know.
You think? Okay. Let's see who's here, Julie, because we got a lot of folks on here. I can see from the comments. And welcome to all of you. We're going to talk about the coronavirus. Jody Shields, apologies to you because I've taped yesterday a segment with Jody, but we've run out of time. I'm going to do it later in the week. But suffice to say that when we get to talk about SailGP, Jody is doing some cool commentary for the SailGP app. And we'll talk about some more at the end of the show. Who else, Julia?
Clark Chapin from the about to be snowy Michigan.
It's always about to be something in Michigan. You talk about Auckland likes to say, if you don't like the weather, wait 6 hours. Well, in Michigan, it's, same thing.
John Emmett greetings from Melbourne, getting ready for 3 races in a very strong westerly wind here.
It's going to be windy down there.
At the radios.
Yeah, JB, that's what you were saying when you were looking at on the app or the website. Right?
Yeah, and just to bring you up to date. They're having a very difficult series. This is their third day,
Yes.
and I believe they've only had 3 races.
They've had one race a day in light
one race
air.
a day, and so they only have a few days left. And today's going to be very windy, but they have to wait for it to shift from the north to the south. So it's going to be a late day again.
This is the laser radial worlds. We've already had the laser worlds and the NACRA, and that's where you were down there for that.
Yeah.
The NACRA and the 49er and the 49er.
And it's a
FX.
qualifying regatta for our radial team.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay. Julia, anybody else?
No.
You see that
John Emmett went on to say that too.
You see that Stephanie Roble's watching. We're going to be talking about you, Steph. Gordon Smith says good evening from Europe. And, of course, Jody Shields, the aforementioned Jody Shields down in Wanji.
Yes.
North of Sydney. Nice to have him on here as well. Okay. And welcome to all of you. This day in history, I love that music, I'm sorry. For the 25th of February, 1964, here is your first clue. You know what this refers to? 1964. I'll give you another clue. Miami Beach. No idea?
Boxer.
A boxer. Well done, Julia. I could have put a cup up there, a boxer's jockstrap and cup. Maybe that would have helped. Okay, what else? Does this help?
Muhammad Ali, yeah.
Muhammad Ali. And who did he fight in Miami
actually,
Beach?
That's Cassius Clay.
He was then well done, John.
Yeah.
He was then Cassius Clay. And who did he fight?
It was probably Joe Louis.
No, it was probably his most famous fight, though. Does that help?
Oh yeah, Sonny Liston.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sonny's crown turns to clay. It's got to be, these headlines. I always wanted to be a headline writer. That's what I get to do here on the show now. I write those lower thirds, but we're serious on TFE Live. We don't write stuff. Look at this. Cassius Clay defeated Sonny Liston in a TKO. The Liston didn't come out of his corner in the start of the 8th round. So a lot of people thought he threw the fight, but he had shoulder problems. And you see the ex-champ purse held up pending shoulder exam there on the right side of that paper because they had, and sure enough, his shoulder was a wreck. But here is a video clip that I've never seen before that is why, if you're not an American, if you don't follow boxing or not perhaps, this guy was a modern day cultural hero in the States. But watch this video, you'll find out why. There's Sonny Liston.
Harry Benson, the great photographer, had set up a shot with the Beatles to take a picture with Cassius Clay, which they did not want to do.
John Lennon said, no, I know this guy, he's a big mouth, and he's going to get beaten. Get the other one. He's going to beat him, Sonny Liston. We want to be with a champion.
Suddenly, the door opens to the dressing room. There is Cassius Clay. Hello, Beatles! And then they followed him out, like an 8th grade class trip. They followed him out into the gym. They lined up. He hit the first one. They all went down like dominoes.
They were always the funny ones, and they were funny. But he was better than they were. He was funnier.
Okay, that's this week in history because that actually happened a week ago. It was not on what is today, the 25th. It was on the 18th from memory. And what a terrific memory. But also there's one other thing this day in history, and there's the clue. The last country in Europe ended corporal punishment. In 1984. It's fairly recent.
I would have never.
And which country was it?
Probably England.
That's bamboo, so. Asia.
England. It was no.
Or Europe. You said Europe.
Europe. And Julia's right. Corporal punishment was banned on this day in 1984. Okay, that's also for our friends in the UK. Just a little cultural reference there. Are we still beating kids here in this country?
Not that I know of. Not officially.
Not officially. Okay. Let's carry on here. We promised you that we're going to talk about the coronavirus because there's so much breaking news, and I was going to do a big preview of SailGP, and we'll cover that on Friday, which of course is the first day of SailGP. It's coming up this weekend in Sydney Saturday and Sunday, but we'll talk a little bit about it at the end of the show. But as you all know, the coronavirus is way more serious than I think a lot of people thought. And even this morning, I woke up and said, this is just a flu season, and a few people die from it. But it's growing like, no pun intended, it's growing like topsy, and it has hit Italy in a big way, and they've had quite a few deaths. And people are now trying to get. In fact, it looks to a lot of us like they're scrambling around to try to get on top of this. And Italy is the hardest hit country in Europe. And of course, we've got a very significant yacht race scheduled there in just a few weeks in Sardinia, in Cagliari. So let's have a look at what CBS is saying just before I went to air here about the dreaded coronavirus.
CBS News senior foreign correspondent Mark Phillips is joining me now just southeast of Milan. Mark, what do you see there?
Well, we're just outside of Codogna, about 7 kilometers, 5 or so miles away. This is the limit of the area of northern Italy that has been affected by the virus outbreak, and the numbers have continued to rise. The latest Italian health report here says there have been more than 50 new cases overnight, and that the total number of those afflicted is now approaching 300.
Police have cordoned off areas near Milan and Venice, where about 50,000 people live. But the question is whether all the cases of the virus reported in Italy can be traced to this region. In Venice, where this is normally carnival time, the party's over, canceled days early. The masks have changed, and people are getting out of town. As everywhere, the deaths associated with the virus have affected the most vulnerable. Luigi D'Angelo is coordinating Italy's emergency response.
The doctors told us clearly that the people have died because they were infected by other problems of health.
They were already sick.
Yeah, they were already sick, and the coronavirus has amplified their sickness.
The World Health Organization hasn't pressed the panic button and has refrained from calling this a pandemic. This is not an uncontained global spread, they say.
The disease, it's still possible to be contained, but if some fail, if some do not do everything that is needed, this can still become out of control with dramatic consequences in global health and global economy.
All right, Mark, the chief medical officer in the UK has said that anyone returning to the country from lockdown zones in northern Italy must self-isolate. What does this mean for travelers? And if you're self-isolating, how is it enforced?
Well, what they've said is it's a bit finer definition than they said.
Okay, enough of all this, but you get the idea that Italy is certainly affected. And just before we went to air, we heard that there's another 12 or 13 countries in Europe that are similarly affected. We know, of course, about South Korea and Japan and China, but it's becoming even more serious, according to our own CDC here in the U.S., because the coronavirus outbreaks halts the Mission Impossible 7 production in Italy. Now, that's serious news.
Yeah.
But more than that, Julia, I'll come back to you in a sec. Just before we went to air, the CDC has warned that the coronavirus spread in the U.S. is not a matter of if, but when, and that we should prepare for, quote, significant disruption. And that's just, again, before we went to air. So how does this relate to sailing? Well, obviously, we're all concerned about sailing events and how it will affect not only the Olympics, which we've been talking about for the last week when I put that article up last week. And JB,
John Emmett just said and tweeted or told us that the Italian Sailing Federation canceled all their large events.
Oh, they did. The FIV, Federazione Italiana Vela. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I think it's becoming obvious that this is But before we go further, John, tell us what was going on in Melbourne with respect to masks and coronaviruses and the Chinese sailors, which Lily Zhu told us about.
Yeah, I don't think Australia is pretty good in terms of locking down their borders. So we really didn't feel like it was a threat where we were. What was a bigger threat was the smoke.
Yeah.
And we were down there for the nationals before the Worlds, and they actually sent us out for racing one day that it was so dark in the middle of the afternoon that the coach boats had their navigation lights on. And the coaches really complained. They really shouldn't have sent us out. And all credit to them, they admitted that. And it was a good lesson for the Worlds. But during the Worlds, we didn't have any problems with smoke. But for the months leading up to it, and you've got to realize that most of the sailors were down there since November, December. So we're down there for 3 months getting ready for this World Championships.
And Lijia told us, Lijia, it's better, it's easier to say Lily.
Yeah.
Lily told us on the show on Friday that, and of course we knew this from John Emmett and a few others, that the Chinese sailors who did not go down there early, once they were ready to go, were barred by Australian immigration.
Yep.
And we're going to talk some more about those implications. Julia.
No, I was just going to say that. Never mind.
Okay. So let's go to the Cup, and particularly the question now is, are these regattas in Cagliari and Portsmouth going to happen? Cagliari, of course, in the southern tip of Sardinia. It seems a long way from northern Italy, but with the spread of this virus going far and wide and rapidly, and is the death rate that high? Is it any worse than not the common cold, but of the normal? Julia's got a comment.
Yeah, the government, John Henfield says the government isn't telling us.
Jay Henfield.
Jay Henfield.
Yep.
The low number of deaths reported are low compared to the common flu deaths, which is this year. I believe the World Health Organization.
I'm sorry, he believes
that's true. That it's that the corona deaths are at a lower rate than the regular flu.
Well, it looks like, or the WHO and the CDC, I'm seeing 2 to 4%, and it's basically old men. It's John. Is that you and me? You went like it's basically it's old men who are smokers and who've got cardiopulmonary problems, and this presents as a bad case of flu, and that matricula, that's the wrong word, turns into pneumonia, and then you die. And of course, bad pneumonia kills a lot of people, and how you get it is, but there's also problems with mutation. There's also, you don't want to spread it around the world if you can avoid it, obviously. Yeah. So the Cup, will those regattas get canceled? Because once you cancel Cagliari, you're going to have to cancel Portsmouth too. And I've talked to some senior people in the Cup since Friday, over the weekend, even today. And it's one thing is to send your team to Cagliari and expose them. Okay, probably the chances of they're fit, they're young for the most part. But do the people in Sardinia, which is a small little island, not relatively it's a big island, but reasonably small place, do they want to have an influx of 4 teams worth? Of course, 2 of the teams are already there. Do they want an influx of these other people and the visitors and the media that could expose perhaps locals? Then, what about them leaving from the regattas and going back to the country? And what happens if what if in the meantime the home country, the U.S. or wherever, says we're not going to let anybody in, whether they are present with symptoms or not, or whether they've got the virus? We're just not going to let anybody in unless you're an American citizen, and then if the American citizen has to go into quarantine, self-imposed quarantine. It's not a good look for an America's Cup team that's trying to train to win the Cup next year, for any team. And it's serious implications, obviously. Now, one hears that the ship carrying Emirates Team New Zealand is off the west coast of Australia, having left New Zealand a few days ago, and yesterday was off Perth, and they're tracking toward Singapore, where I believe, I'm not sure, I've not been able to get word from Emirates Team New Zealand, where I believe that AC-75, their boat 1, is going to be Teahe, is going to be taken off that ship, put on another ship to send to Cagliari. My guess is, and it's only guess, this is speculation here, my guess is they're going to call off Cagliari and hence Portsmouth, and Mr. Dalton is going to be able to get his boat, his AC-75, off that ship, put it on another ship, send it back to New Zealand, and the New York Yacht Club team, who's sitting in Pensacola, will not send their boat to Cagliari either, and they're not planning to ship for another couple weeks. I also can tell you that the Challenger of Record specifically Laurent Esquier, is meeting, if not today, tomorrow, and the next days, with the Italian health authorities about what they are going to be. And again, it's not really up to the challenge of record, John, just like it wasn't up to the authorities. Yeah. It was up to, not to the organizing authority of the host club. It was up to the Australian immigration who said, sorry, Chinese sailors, you can't come.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. So I suspect that's what's going to happen. Now, ironically, Long Beach Yacht Club's Stars Plus Stripes, Team USA, may be kept alive. Now, see, I'm a headline writer. May be kept alive by this virus, because if they don't front up in Sardinia, they're out of the event by the conditions, by the protocol. But if the event doesn't happen, they might get a third or fourth. Why are you guys smiling?
It's true.
I'm sitting in the shower thinking, what are all the implications? Not sitting, standing in the shower this morning.
Is that their boat?
That's their boat right there.
Where is it?
I don't know.
That's the model.
That's the joke. And John, you see, have you looked at that model closely? You see that it's obviously some model maker made it for them, but the foil, the windward foil is down and the leeward foil is up. The thing would tip over immediately because it's supposed to be the other way around. But okay, so we're not picking on Long Beach Yacht Club anymore. We're never picking on them. We're just making pithy observations about their absolute zero chances. Now, just before we went there, literally before we went there, the Associated Press said that the coronavirus, in this headline, could force cancellation of Tokyo Olympics, a senior IOC member says. And this is Canadian Dick Pound, Richard Pound, who I know not well, and he has called for the Olympics to be canceled. And of course, you probably know that the last time the Olympics were canceled were the Tokyo Olympics 1940, when the war broke out. That's the only other time that the Olympics have been canceled.
But the 1980, when especially for the U.S.,
the boycott,
that's 8 to 10 years of stuff that sailors.
Well, John, you were affected by the boycott, weren't you?
I was on the team.
Yeah.
And so that was bad.
Let's talk about the boycott for a second, because I made the point in my article on SailingIllustrated.com the other day that whatever happens, do not cancel the Olympics. If you have to divvy the sports up to different venues and have sailing in Melbourne or in Long Beach or tell me where, and if archery goes wherever it goes, don't do what our government did to us in 1980, forcing us not to go to Moscow.
Yeah, as a competitor, it's devastating.
Absolutely.
And we got the news when we were down in New Zealand at the Finn Gold Cup, Finn Worlds, and
off Takapuna Beach.
Yeah, and then we held the trials after that in Newport. So we still had the trials and completed the team, and it was really upsetting to everybody,
to say the least. And especially when people have trained for not necessarily 4 years, but 8 or 12 years. Yeah. And if they're a little older in their Olympic cycle, this may be their one and only or their last shot, right?
Yeah.
So I hope that doesn't happen. But this article came out just before we went to air, and I'm watching. I got the tube on here. The market's down again for the second day in a row. It's not quite as bad as yesterday. It's still down 800, almost 900 points. And I don't think that's our political situation here as much as it is coronavirus, because the political situation hasn't changed that much since, you can argue about Nevada having put the Democrat Socialist into the lead. But that begs the question of the day, which is, how is yacht racing going to be affected by the coronavirus? And I ask all of you to weigh in on this in the comments, and Julia will be monitoring them. And, it's not how will it be affected, and it's also what should happen. Should the Olympics be canceled? Should they be divvied up? Should they be postponed? Should those regattas now, knowing what we now know, and there's only 3 days left here before that ship carrying the Team New Zealand boat. You don't want to wait and cancel it after the boat's en route from Singapore to Cagliari. That's grossly unfair to ETNZ. Nor do you want New York Yacht Club to ship their AC-75. What about the Olympic sailors? What's going to happen to SailGP? They're going to carry on apparently this weekend in Sydney from everything we hear. But what about San Francisco? Will that event come here in 2 months' time? So what should happen and what will happen is really the question of the day. And think about that, and please comment. We'll come back to your comments in a moment. In the meanwhile, let's get on with the segment with our VIP guest in studio today, the American John Bertrand. You were a cute kid, John.
Who is that?
Yeah.
Who is that?
Yeah.
What? Tell us about that photo. Those photos.
Well, I think the one on the left is taken here locally in San Francisco, and it might have been a Finn regatta that was going on, the Zellerbach or one of those regattas. And the one on the right is Great Memories. That's Dave Ullman in the background. And it's a team race in Lido 14s down in Mission Bay. And it was, back then we weren't, teams that went around and did this. It's like a bunch of us just got together and said, hey, let's form our own team. There's a team race going on. And, Dave was,
he was the perennial Lido 14 champion, wasn't he?
He was. I have a little Dave Ullman story that might be a little fun to share. In the early days,
and he was just with you in Melbourne as a coach.
Yeah, he was, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in the early days, actually, I think even before Laser, I was just sailing the Banshee, but I crewed on a 470 a couple times, a local guy. And we went to Alamitos Bay for a regatta, and you read about Dave Ullman and hear about him, and I don't know if he was world champion and back then, but he was a god, and
still is,
and a nice guy, and so we went out and we raced against him, and I was crewing, I told my skipper, I said, just follow Dave, and so we matched him tack for tack, and at the end of the race, Dave came back and he goes, "You guys were so good." It just so happened that where we tacked, which was another 20 seconds later, happened to be. So anyway, that's really one of my favorite memories with Dave.
And those boats, that class is still going strong, and Newport Beach, and down in San Diego, and.
Yeah, and that was the beginning of the strength in this country, which really impacted how good we were in the 470 over all those Olympics.
How about this picture?
Yeah, I bet you that's.
When did you start racing the Finn?
Well, it was in '76. I won the Laser Worlds in Kiel. And then I came back, and Ed Bennett, who went to the Olympics for us here in St. Francis, was a Finn sailor. And after that, it was really great back then because the Finn guys were always looking for the next generation. And so they contacted me, and one of the associations, the Finn associations, would have Finns placed around the country for people to use and sail. And so they actually came in, and they tried to strong arm me to say, you need to be in the Finn. And I was working with my high school coach, Bill Monty, who was mentoring me.
You talked about in the last show, yeah.
And so he and I decided that we should stay with the Laser one more year, and we would work on fitness. And, I took ballet, and we kind of did some radical things to see how the impact of that. And it was very successful, won the Worlds in '77. And then jumped in '78 and won the Gold Cup down in Mexico. And the story behind that
picture, I think, is from Takapuna, actually.
Yeah, I think it is. It is, because it was really windy.
You know who took that picture?
I don't.
Peter
Montgomery.
Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Peter
good
commentary. Yeah.
But yeah, it was. There's a thread to that photo, and maybe we can talk about it down later in the program when we talk about the Olympic campaign.
While we're on this, what about the Finn class? Why are we kicking the Finn class out of the Olympics?
I think there's some commercial deals that maybe went on in the background, and
you think?
Yeah, and it just makes no sense. I mean, that is
stupid.
It's stupid. It's
pathetic.
Yeah.
We're not. I think it's going to get reversed. I mean, a lot of us.
We're hoping.
And is that down in Melbourne among the people you're talking with down there? Do they care, or are they just trying to defend their own class?
I think they care, but I think they also feel kind of hopeless. And the other thing, probably the reality is, if it doesn't get reversed, it'll get reversed for Los Angeles. it's not this keelboat thing is just not going to last. It's going to be one and done.
It's tough to come back from.
So we'll give the French their medals, and and then we'll go back to the Finn.
Just to remind everybody who's watching, the IOC, as you know, still the program commission has to approve the 2024 program that is proposed by World Sailing. And there's a lot of people who think the IOC will not approve some of what we're up to. And specifically that they will reinstate the Finn, which is one of the two classes in the modern era, at least since Elstrom in the 50s, that have produced all the great heroes, not only yourself, but, name them, Coots, the Spanish, the Brazilians,
Percy,
Aussie John Bertrand, Ainsley, of course. Who else?
The class will go on. The class will remain very strong. So, like the Star did.
Like the Star still is.
Yeah. And so I expect they'll be back for Los Angeles. And that's all I have to say at this point about that.
And John Emmett is saying that, and I think he's right, that most of the sailors are super focused on the 2020 games, and it's so hard to think about 2024 for a lot, except those who've been eliminated who were hoping to carry on for something.
Yeah.
So, okay, Julia?
John Shaffer, who's off FOSI, says, I'm in the World Health Organization and the CDC meetings every day.
He is, and he's talking to me every morning, by the way.
And he's going to send the information to Sailing Illustrated.
Good. He's tipping me off to a lot of this stuff, so because there's a network news cycle, and by the time CBS gets around to writing a story and getting someone on camera, it can be 12 hours. So that's why we are so current here. Okay, John, next picture.
Yeah.
What is that?
That is on San Francisco Bay, and it's an 18-footer.
Is that a Sydney Harbor, an I-18?
That's on it's a Sydney Harbor 18, but we're in San Francisco Bay.
That's what I mean. It's a Sydney Harbor 18, right?
And that is Ian Murray's boat.
Cool.
And he was winning the regatta with a day to spare, so he let me take over. And it was quite an experience because
Were you crewing for him?
I wasn't crewing for him. It was he just he was promoting the class.
Wow.
And
fabulous.
So they geared me up, and we went out. And the first time we set a shoot, it was really exciting because the boat took off, and I stayed in the same spot.
You did?
Like right out the back.
You were right out the back of the boat.
But there was obviously a photographer on board, and
Yeah.
so this was some promotional stuff. And then
who's sailing with you?
I wish that's his right-hand man. And I'm going to be reamed for not remembering his name. Very
it's a long
famous.
time ago. This is early 80s, right?
Yeah, early.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, and then I raced the boat the next day in the final race. So that was kind of our promotional day out.
It was cool.
It was great.
And do you know that Ian's just been named as the regatta director yet again for the America's Cup?
Oh, great.
Because another gentleman had been named, and then he's been excused, and now Ian Murray's been brought back in as he did here in San Francisco, and then again in Bermuda, and he will be once again the regatta director. We announced that here on the show. In fact, it hasn't been announced yet. That was another one of our one here's, but that's I'm reliably informed.
Right.
You know how you can tell that when we rarely, John, we triple check these things. I mean, before I go on here and make some, and this is not exactly nuclear secrets or anything, but when we hear something, people like to hear it and hear it ahead of time, and then go talk at the yacht club bar, and maybe say congratulations. But we double and triple, quadruple check these things, and we can always tell if I do say something wrong. I hear about it maybe during the show, if not afterwards. How about this? How about this shot? You're now a little. Well, it's a darker beard than you have now.
That's definitely after the '80 boycott because I grew the beard as a protest and held on to it for 20 or 30 years.
Did you?
Yeah.
I'm back now to our favorite shot. We talked about it at the top of the show, so we don't really have to reiterate it. But once again, fabulous. That is the photo credit. I pulled that somewhere else, but I think I have a higher res. That's a pretty decent shot. But I think who took that picture? I think Daniel Forster took that picture. And if not, I will find out and apologize in the next show. John, the Olympics. That's what we're really here to talk about.
Yeah.
And the Tokyo Olympics, 24 July to 9 August, just in 5 months, not even. And what are we thinking about the Olympics?
Well, I mean, I'm here today to kind of talk about some exciting news for U.S. sailing and for the followers of U.S. sailing, and that was the bronze medal performance of Stephanie Roble and Maggie Shea, who's here on the screen.
In the 49er
in the
FX.
49er FX. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do a little work with them. We had a training block in San Francisco, and I spent 10 days with them down in New Zealand in one of their training blocks before the Worlds.
Because you weren't really coaching them, you were coaching somebody else.
Yeah, no, I was the laser coach, Chris Barnard in the laser, but we had taken a break. And kind of how it all came about was an interesting story. If you want me to,
please.
Yeah, in Japan, in between the test event and the World Cup event, all the coaches got together and we talked about our programs and our sailors, and with the idea. Example for me, I wanted to get some input. Is there anything I could be doing to help Chris? We have a
Chris Barnard, Newport Beach laser sailor.
And it was a way for all of us. It was almost like a therapy session in one regard. We're all sitting around in a circle, but it's a really good approach where people could hear the challenges that each coach has, and there's a smart group, good group of coaches that had input. And so Julia, who was coaching Stephanie and Maggie, brought up a few things, and I kind of put my hand up and said, I think I might be able to help you there. And so in Japan, I sat down with the girls and we talked about starting. And as it turned out, then, which I think they enjoyed, and then they had a training camp scheduled for a month later here in San Francisco, and Julia, who is an incredible coach. I have a story about Julia. She is Italian. She's been to 4 Olympics. She's world champion in 470 and the FX, and just an incredible coach. So that's who was coaching them, and she was open to having some input.
Is Julia in this shot?
That's Julia there with her back to us,
That's a graphically challenged shot. The shot's actually quite good, and it's my computer program. And Dave Ullman is in that picture.
And Dave
too.
Ullman. And this is them winning the trials, which we'll get to at the Worlds in Geelong. And but a story about Julia. I'll get back to the other story in a second. But in New Zealand, when we were down there training, I dropped in on a training block that they did. It was Julia's birthday, and there was some training races going on. And so Stephanie and Maggie decided to let Julia have a go, get back in the boat. And Julia's Olympic crew happened to be there coaching as well. And so the final race of the afternoon, they jumped in the boat. And we're talking about the current gold medalists and the current silver medalists and the world champion. All the boats were there in this training race. And Julia didn't want to interfere, so she started behind everyone on port. And I figured, okay, well, and I'm videotaping the session. And next thing you know, I see this boat like rolling the gold medalists and the silver medalists. And it was Julia. And how would you like to have a coach that could do that?
How old is she now?
I think she's 30s.
So she's still pretty young.
still very young.
It's not like she's our age.
No, and new to coaching. Yeah, she could. So anyway, so she's a fantastic coach, but so she was unable to do the training out here, and they were looking for a coach. And so as a last resort, I was in town, so they engaged me to work with them for 2 weeks. And they had organized.
And at this point, they were not the top dog in the U.S.
I think that Anna and Paris, who is the other team, they were training separately, but they were kind of trading really good results over in these events.
I got your picture. There's Paris Henken.
Yeah.
And Anna Tunnicliffe Tobias.
Yeah.
And of course Anna, who is one of the most fit people I have ever met.
Yes, she is.
Astonishingly fit, and she was in the Sailing Illustrated muscle athlete issue some years ago, and she's just ripped and probably still is.
Yeah.
And of course the double gold medalist.
No, she won the radial gold in 2008.
Radial gold in 08.
Yeah, but she's just this year, for I think the second time, won her age group in the CrossFit Games.
Oh, that's right. She's a
yeah.
big CrossFitter now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's right.
really impressive. And this team has only been together, I believe, like a year, maybe a season or a little longer.
So are they going to train together now that the other ladies have secured the
you
berth?
would hope so, but you know, when you lose the trials, there's a period where you know, of reflection, and do you want to go on? And there's some other challenges with funding and all that sort of things. But so as a last resort, I got pulled in to work with Stephanie and Maggie. And when I was in Japan, I kind of looked over all their trackers from their races there, and I picked up a few things that I thought, well, maybe we should look at. And the first time I saw them on the water, well, first off, we had a meeting before we went out, and I'm super impressed with their intensity and their focus.
You had to wire the boats up.
And this is part of the program they set up, was that you've got Riley, who is our head of our technical, one of our sports science guys.
For the U.S. sailing team.
He was with Artemis.
We're not giving away any secrets here, are we?
No, he was worked for Artemis when the Cup was in San Francisco, head of their technical
performance
program.
team.
Who you can't see is Peter Logan, who worked for the Singapore team, and then he's Australian, and then he came back to Australia and worked for the Australia Institute of Sport as one of their top sports scientists. And then he was engaged with Australia Sailing. When I was with the Australia Sailing team for 5 years, he took care of all their data, all their data acquisition. And in fact, before he came to work for the U.S. team, the Australia Olympic Committee wanted to hire him. And he came here. Guess who they hired instead?
Ian Burns.
Ian Burns,
Fresh.
who lives in San Francisco and commutes to Australia.
Yeah.
So if you go back to that slide.
And there's been some criticism by apparently that overall overarching Australian sports body is saying these guys are that body is spending money like water.
Yeah.
And Ian Burns was specifically called out as an example, not Fresh personally, but as an example of, well, why do we have a performance guy commuting from San Francisco? Well, San Francisco's got the high tech, and Fresh is very good. Very good.
But they wanted Peter first.
Oh, they did.
And so here, if you go back to that slide, we've got Riley and Peter, who are going through with Stephanie there. If you see right to the left of her head, it's called True Sail. And so this is a technology that is publicly available, but it's quite expensive, and Stephanie went ahead and purchased this package.
She hasn't had a lot of support from U.S. Sailing, have they?
Well, the support they get is really kind of in services and things like that, but there are certain limitations that they have, and so instead of just not making do with what is available, they went out and they purchased this equipment, and it measures different parts of the boat, the main, the rudder angle, the heel angle, the speed. And so we set up what you would do with an America's Cup program, and it does it wirelessly. So through our training,
so you record all that data,
which Riley and Peter go over at night
every second or two, or even
probably more than that,
multiple times per second. So just like an AC training testing campaign.
And so I'm out there running the training, the drills, and I'm videotaping as well. And then these guys are tracking the data. So every morning we would get together and go over the data, and it would be a 2 or 3 hour debrief.
You can play the video next to the data synced up, and you can see steering through waves and body.
They've got GPS on their bodies, and if you go back,
they do.
Yeah. And,
oh wow.
And if you go back, there's another crew there which is from Argentina, who is their training partner, and so we are doing 2 boat testing, and it was really, really productive. And so much so that they brought Riley and myself down to New Zealand to their final training block
to keep helping before this latest. That's why you were down there. Yeah. And then in Australia.
Yeah. But I got to tell you about this team. When I first saw them on the water as an experienced coach, I was super impressed. And as I told them, I said, I know what I know, and what I see is really talent. And first off, the FX is a very difficult boat to sail, and I was amazed at how difficult it is when you do maneuvers and whatnot. what's really impressive about this team, very aggressive, very dynamic. When you watch them tack, they're probably one of the quickest crews through a tack. And when you watch them hoist the chute, their chute is up and going before the transom leaves the weather mark.
Mm.
And so anyway, and plus their intensity. And if you recall, in the last time I was on the show, you know, a big impact in how I look at sailing in high performance was the time I spent with Dennis Conner. You know, no excuse to lose.
Mm.
This team has that same approach. So they're not willing to not, you know, they brought me in, they brought Riley in, they bought this equipment, they paid for us to go down to New Zealand. And in the final Worlds in Australia, they brought in Dave Ullman, they brought in their sports psychologist. No excuse. And that's what's so exciting and impressive about this team.
And just, I mean, it's just astonishingly cool. And to think that they might not get a chance to go sail in the Olympics would be crushing. So hopefully they'll figure something out so they can go sail some way, somehow, if Tokyo gets called off, because they've spent a lot of money, a lot of time and effort. Yeah. And now you rank them as one of the best prospects for a medal, don't you? From the U.S.
Yeah, and I've actually, when I came back from after 2016, I actually did a pretty in-depth study of, you know, how teams perform and use the data and analysis to see if you can anticipate what teams going into the Olympics would expect. Mm. And based on that, if you looked at the 2016, you know, forecast, I looked at the World Cup medals the year before the Rio Olympics.
You don't want this slide yet.
No, not yet.
Okay.
And what I discovered was in forecasting medal potential, Australia had 36 World Cup medals the year before the Olympics. Great Britain had 29 World Cup medals before the Olympics. New Zealand had 13. The U.S. had 2.
So a pretty good indication of where.
So pretty good indication. And I've got to say, to the credit of the U.S. sailing team in Rio, you know, they won a medal. It was a surprise medal. And thank God for that. Otherwise, it would have been 2 Olympics in a row without a medal. Mm. But the other thing I looked at, which I don't think was really, you know, brought to the front, is out of 10 classes, they had 6 sailors in the medal race. Mm. So from a team performance, they were actually quite high.
This is the U.S.
This is the U.S.
Down there in Melbourne just now?
No, in the 2016 Olympics in Rio.
Copy. Okay, so leading up to the Rio Olympics, the U.S. actually was doing better.
Yeah, well, no, at the Rio Olympics, coming out of the Rio Olympics, they had 1 medal.
Right.
But they also had six teams in the top 10 in the medal race. Right. And that's a metric that you should, you know, credit.
Absolutely,
you know, in terms of the team. And we're a team that takes the full team. Mm. So that's out of 10 events. Mm. So if you want to look at a similar matrix going into the 2020 Olympics, I've kind of looked at it differently and kind of in a unique way. And you can't really use the World Cup anymore because the World Cup,
people don't show up for it.
It's kind of a
joke.
I don't. You said that.
It's a joke.
I didn't complete
the world sailing is going to stop doing it because no one shows up and it's hugely expensive. It's a joke. Yeah. Use the Class World Championships.
So I've done that, and I've kind of put together the results from our team in terms of what to expect. But I've also looked at class by class and country by country. And I've come up with a system which is maybe a little unique, and maybe people can comment when they hear of it. But I'm discussing countries that have locked medals. And when I say locked medals, that means these are guaranteed medals, but if they don't win them, that's a failure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there are likely medals.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at Great Britain, they have a lock on the NACRA, the 49er, the 470 women, and the Finn.
That's gold or a medal?
A medal.
A medal.
Likely is the RSX women, the laser, the radial, the 49er FX, and the 470 men.
Wow. That's
9 classes. They could come out of 2020 with 9 medals. Mm. Okay. Australia has a lock on 3 classes, the NACRA, the laser, and the 470 men. And I don't have anyone other than that in terms of a likely medal. So if they come away with less than 3 medals, they could be 3 gold medals. New Zealand has a lock on the 49er, the Finn, and the 49er FX, which is the current silver medalist, and a likely in the laser. So those are, looking at those countries, the Netherlands are probably a lock for 2 medals, the radial and the windsurfer. So then if you want to look in terms of which classes are locked, because if a class is locked by numerous countries, for the U.S. to break into that isn't really a big ask. So in the NACRA, I only have Great Britain and Australia as locked medals. So that means there's 1 spot open for another country. You know, could be Argentina, it could be New Zealand.
Speaking of that, did you hear, and maybe somebody in the comments, I understand that Australia was informing their people this week who qualified. Do we know who qualified for the NACRA from Australia?
I don't know.
If anybody knows that
question.
on here, and
it's not been not so far. Yeah.
If Jody Shields, who may know that, if you know that, Jody, let us know, would you? So yeah, I get it. So why send somebody in that class if they're locked, or?
Well, let's go down the list. So the NACRA, we've got Great Britain and Australia are locked, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're going to win the medal. Both of those teams could fail in the 3 teams, but that leaves a spot open. The laser, the only lock I have in the laser is Australia, because all the other classes are kind of up and down, but it's really packed at the top. The radial I consider locked. You've got the Netherlands, Belgium, and Denmark. The Finn is locked. Great Britain, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. New Zealand, the 49er and is New Zealand and Great Britain. So that leaves a space open, but we haven't qualified. So the FX, I have it wide open. I don't have any team locked in there.
Which is good for Stephanie.
Which is good for Stephanie and Maggie.
The
470 men, Australia and Japan.
Yes.
That leaves 1 open there, and 470 women is Great Britain and Japan. So Japan's going to end up with at least 2 medals.
Yeah.
I mean, according to
this
to
is
me.
the JB prognostication.
Right.
Yeah.
But what then does this indicate? How does this affect strategy?
Well,
do you go coach hard, spend money in the classes where there's positions?
I think what with this analysis, you got to think that the FX and Stephanie and Maggie are our best chance.
Because you think that class is wide open.
Because it's wide open, and whatever resources in terms of Riley and other support, that if this was Australia, if this was Great Britain, there's no question where that support would go and that focus would go, and we as a country need a medal.
When you were in Australia coaching, because you were down there for how many years?
Well, I was with them for 5, but in country for 3.
So. Did you make such an analysis in Australia when you were there and coaching, or did they?
Well, they're very focused, and they're focused on their best prospects, and they're compassionately ruthless. Okay.
The Aussies,
as well as the Brits, but it's also very transparent, because as a sailor, you know what you need to achieve to get selected or get support, and it's a system that works. And so, this is based on years of experience working with the Australians, and I also worked with the Great Britain for a year as well, and just my ability to observe a lot of successful programs.
Okay, so what about these charts?
So
do we want to show those?
Yeah. So if we got in, and the big story here is how exciting this trial system for the FX was. And so the system for the FX was the combined scores of 2 world championships, the 2019 Worlds in New Zealand and the 2020 Worlds, which was 3 months later.
That's how the U.S. chose their.
Yeah. So your combined score, and whoever has the best combined score of those 2 worlds. And there were two teams that were vying for the FX. It was Stephanie and Maggie, and Paris and Anna. And this graph here, this slide here, actually shows their progression through the event. So each data point is their fleet position, their overall position throughout the regatta. So to the left of the purple line,
I just covered it up.
to the left of the purple line are the qualification races. So there are 8 qualification races. Then from the purple line to the right are the final races. And you could see that that in the beginning, that Stephanie and Maggie were 14th after the first race, and Anna and Paris were 21st. But then the next race they came together, and then look at Paris and Anna skyrocketed to the top.
This is 2019.
2019, they were winning the worlds after the 4th race.
And this was in New Zealand just late last year.
In New Zealand, but you can also see Stephanie and Maggie's performance go way down.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about this graph at the bottom is that's the last race before they split the fleets.
Yes.
And they were within 2 points of not making the gold fleet.
Wow.
So if they wouldn't have made the gold fleet, it would have been game over for them. But they pulled it out. But now look at their graph goes all the way up from there for the second half.
Right.
And I think you could say, and I could say this honestly, that Stephanie and Maggie were suffering from nerves a little bit because they had dominated the pre-worlds and were showing great form before the pre-worlds. And I think that might have got into their heads a little bit. So at the end of the day, at the end of that graph to the right, you see that USA 9, which is Paris and Anna, finished 9th. And USA 50, which is Stephanie and Maggie, finished 13th. So that's 4 places. Going into the next slide, which is the World Championships in Australia.
Just completed.
Just completed. So Stephanie and Maggie needed to beat Paris and Anna by 4 places in the 2020 Worlds. And you can see that from this graph that Stephanie and Maggie started quite strong with a 4th, and Paris and Anna were 12th. And then they took a big dive, but then they came back together. And so going into the final series, they were still only a couple places apart.
Right.
But Stephanie and Maggie had to get 4 places ahead. And it came down to the final race was the medal race. And so going into the medal race, Stephanie and Maggie were not ahead, and they were actually behind by a couple points. So there are only 10 boats in the medal race.
Yeah, you see that crossover right there.
And it's double points. And it was the most amazing race that they put together. And it was what I call a peak performance. It went back and forth through the whole race. And Stephanie and Maggie went out and ended up winning the race. And at the last weather mark, they were still losing the trials. And Anna and Paris got rolled by the Spanish boat or the German boat, and they got passed to leeward by the Spanish boat. And that meant they tied for 6th and 7th in the regatta, and they lost the tie. So they ended up 7th with Stephanie and Maggie in 4th. So now they're tied in the Olympic trials. They both have the same 16 points.
Under the U.S. system.
Under the U.S. system, the tiebreak goes to the winner of the Australian Worlds.
The second regatta.
Second regatta. Heartbreaking for
this regatta.
Yeah, heartbreaking for Paris and Anna.
Well, they've got their work cut out for them now to raise some money because it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's been a hugely expensive campaign. So I understand, John, take us through this. They've got a Facebook post.
Yeah.
We are so excited and honored that we've earned the privilege to represent Team USA in Tokyo this summer. We only have 4.5 months before we check into the Olympic venue. Our support team is growing, and we have a full and aggressive schedule to maximize this opportunity. We've put together a gold medal plan, and we will need your help. More to come on that soon. But in the meantime, for the generous individuals who are eager to help, every little bit will help this final push. Thank you, Steph and Maggie. And they have set up, is it a crowdfunding?
Yeah, no, they're actually the Inland Lake Yachting Federation
Association.
Yeah, association is their.
ILYA.
Yeah, you know that quite well, and they do. They're like the St. Francis Foundation. They do a lot of supporting of these Olympic teams. So they're supporting Stephanie and Maggie.
Stephanie and Maggie.
And they have a link on their website. and I've learned that they still have 70% of their budget for 2020 to raise.
Oh.
So I have volunteered to help them with fundraising, and so I'm donating my time to help them to raise the funds.
How much order of magnitude can you say? How much?
I
do they
don't
have?
really. I don't have that figure.
But is it 10 grand? Is it 110 grand? Is
It's hard to guess. It's going to be closer to 100
grand, right?
or above. And they have other sources of funding. So, but the other thing is they're bringing Dave Ullman on. They're
Nice.
bringing, they want to win a gold medal.
Great.
And
your judgment is that class is one of the classes that in fact, it's the most open.
Most open.
Most open class.
And the other part about helping them out is the fact that if we can solve this problem quickly, they don't have to worry about it. And it's a distraction otherwise.
So Roble, their website, and I've been on it today, roblesailing.com/donate. And the ILYA, the Inland Lake Yachting Association, which is Scow Country, are asking all of us to help them. And see, this is the great thing, and has in the past been the great thing about sailing in this country, is that we decentralized, and this is the pitch I have been on.
Yeah.
You try to centralize it, send all the money to U.S. Sailing, and we're from the federal government. We're here to help. And U.S. Sailing does a lot of stuff, have always and always will, for the Olympic program. But when you get the whole country involved, you get Scout Country involved, you get San Diego Yacht Club and St. Francis Yacht Club and Texas Corinthian and Lauderdale Yacht Club and on and on and on. The New York Yacht Club does a big golden spinnaker ball, or at least they used to. And we've got to they still do,
yeah,
right?
It's upcoming.
We got to decentralize, and we got to get all the clubs and all the classes and people together so that these gals have I think you laid it out very well, John. They've got a good shot at medaling. Yeah. And who knows, maybe even a gold medal, pull out do a Caleb Payne and pull out a medal and maybe more.
Well, that's their focus. Their focus is just not a medal. It's actually it's a gold medal, and I believe in them, and so much so that I'm donating my time to help them.
Good for you.
And I think this is
great.
This is
Julia. We got a ton of. We'll come back to the comments in a second. Let's wrap this segment up. Now tell us about these guys, Riley Gibbs he's from Long Beach, and Anna Weis, we would say, auf Deutsch, but how do they say it? Weis or Weis?
Probably Weis or Weis.
Yeah.
But
that's
really,
a tough class.
Yeah, really, really talented team. They've just come together recently, so it's a new team. And Anna came from the radial, and Riley is an incredible talent. I mean, if he didn't want to sail NACRA, he could sail foiling kite. And this team is the future of the program.
They were quite a surprise, weren't they?
Yeah,
they came on strong at the end.
Quite a talent. He is with the GP US team in Australia.
Right.
And actually that kind of brings up another point that I've been researching and thinking about. And there's great potential for the U.S. teams, and one reason I think is that
in 2020 or beyond,
just in general.
In general,
and Steph and Maggie are an example. Is that they have a wealth of experience in other sailing, so they're match racing champions. They sail on big boats. We can have a discussion about college sailing, but they have this wealth of experience where they can have a program like they put together in San Francisco. And really understand, okay, this is data driven, and because they've seen it on big boats, far 40s, whatever, Melges, they see how it works. Where other countries, they've got such a tight pipeline. These sailors come out of opties, they go straight into whatever, and they don't really have the opportunity to experience what our sailors. And so, Riley and Steph and Maggie are examples where to get them to world-class level really is maybe not that long of a process. We just have to give them that support.
Plus, you've got to, I can't remember who made the point down in San Diego at the Sailing Leadership Forum, but plus you got to keep them going. It's for sailor retention, right? That's important.
Well, that's the issue. And for Stephanie and Maggie, I mean, they're 30 years old, and you'd want them for the next Olympics as well, and Anna in Paris, and so it's a real challenge, and it's one that's that we've got to work on.
Have you seen, just announced in the last day or so, the RYA's regional training program?
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Have you had time to digest that?
Well, they're ahead of the curve. I haven't been able to digest it, but I can just bring up another point about these programs, those programs in particular. While we're down in Australia getting ready for the World Championships, and the Olympic teams are coming to a very sharp focus.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, in Vila Moura in Portugal, their development programs are having winter training camps. So their next generation of sailors.
Development program, meaning for the future.
For 24.
We call ODP, Olympic Development Program,
right.
is quite a successful program here in the U.S., but that's not talking about developing this quadrennium. That's subsequent quadrenniums, right?
And the mistake is that we look at Olympic cycles every 4 years, starting at the end of one Olympics to the next. And it really should be in between the quads, because 1 or 2 years before the Olympics, you want to be medaling, which is at these World Championships and these big events, and you don't want to have to wait for the Olympic year to do it. And one problem that we have with this turnover of Olympic performance directors and change of plans is not only do we get in front of that system, we actually lose 1 to 2 years each quad, interjecting a new program.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's something that really needs to be seriously looked at.
Good point. I've just gotten speaking of Tokyo, and we got Riley and Anna's slide in here still, but I've just gotten a note from Henry Reese. Thank you, Henry, who says that the Olympics, the IOC, have a $900 million reserve fund, almost $1 billion in the case of canceled Olympics. And he's kindly sent me a link to an article which I will post somewhere, either on my Facebook page or on sailingillustrated.com. Julia.
Oh, again, be sure to look at all the comments, but some of them, Ben Rummacher says there are a bunch of new female coaches on the scene, and he gives aspect to it.
That's really true, isn't it, John?
Yeah, it is.
Which is cool, which is great for the sport.
Yeah.
For a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And Alex Saldana says, "Good morning, Tom and John, directly from Australia."
Alex is a Brazilian. Do you know Alex?
I think I do. Yeah.
Cool guy. He's on here all the time. We've got we got a regular group. We've got to get Alex on here.
Well, we should. Alex, let us know.
Julia, let's call him up and get him on here. Julia, you're the bloody producer.
Andrew Pindar, Dubai Muscat is still happening on Friday. Speaking of which, 0200 here in the UAE, and it's time for some sleep.
Yeah, another great guy.
Another great guy.
Greetings to John, and
Andrew.
Thanks for his coaching and constant encouragement of so many young sailors who sometimes can't see it themselves.
Do you ever feel like you're becoming a younger version of Gus Miller?
Oh my God!
Has anyone ever,
as a compliment?
As a compliment. I mean, you're getting a little grayer and you're getting a little older, and there's a guy.
Yeah, no.
Who you know well from the Finn class, and I know well from the University of Michigan and the Finn class and so on. But what a wonderful contribution he has made to the sport.
Absolutely.
And how many other people have done this? We talk about cool people. This show is about cool people. Our sport is about cool people.
Well,
but this is what makes our sport
so where I'm coming from is, first off, I was inspired by everything that St. Francis gave to me and the foundation, and I've never forgotten it. And so if I can pass it forward at every opportunity.
Absolutely.
And
KR too, he's now the chairman of the board at St. Francis.
When I see an opportunity to help somebody, it doesn't matter if they're U.S. or foreign, and that's what Andrew is talking about, is recently, before I came onto the U.S. team, I actually helped a British radio sailor get back into Olympic sailing. And I took over her program and I said, this is something you need to do, because I thought she was quite talented. And Andrew and I, went ahead and we put together some fundraising things, and we raised some money for her. And now she's putting together she didn't qualify for 2020, but she's going to 2024. Recently, I've, worked with an Australian radio sailor who I discovered when I was running the program down there. So when I see an opportunity to help somebody, I'm there, and it's really satisfying to do that. And I get more out of it than they do.
How about Charlie and Luthor?
Yeah. Yeah, quite a team. I mean, Charlie is he's put in the full effort here.
He's qualified.
He's qualified.
He's
yeah.
eked out. It was really close with Mark.
Yeah.
Mark Muller or no?
Yeah, with Chris Barnard.
Chris Barnard, right?
Who I was coaching, and actually at one point,
also a Newport Beach guy.
With 5 races left, we were right there, and then the last 5 races it got windy, and unfortunately Chris wasn't as good as Charlie in a breeze. But yeah, Luthor's got a lot on now. He's
had to step into the shoes of Malcolm Page, and it's a tough role. Plus, Greg went away. Greg Fisher went away.
Yeah. So double duty, and I suspect that he's spending a lot of time with the coaches and the sailors, but he has a world championship coming up in Palma. So the Finns have their world championships. The 470s have their world championships in Palma in April. So
do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I there's going to be a major rethink of all this stuff depending upon what happens with this virus the next few days.
I wish you'd stop saying virus.
It is. That's how you pronounce it in every other language except English.
Well, we're speaking English.
Well, it's a virus. We've got a lot of non-English language people on here, Julie. We're trying to be ecumenical and global in our outlook.
Yeah.
Okay, the bloody virus. How's that? Is that better?
It's very English.
John, she doesn't like when I say the American Cup boat race,
right?
Which is what everybody who's not a sailor calls it, or the America Cup, or the American Cup. Okay, enough.
Yeah.
So these guys are Charlie. He's been in the teens in most of the regattas, and you think that class is all but locked, or is locked?
No, I think there's 2 open spots, but it is so packed at the top, and I've been watching it for a number of years now, and and this can bring up a subject that I touched on. The Europeans and the Australians and the Kiwis are a step ahead of us, of North America.
In development?
In speed.
Speed.
Okay. And
all classes?
No, well, in the laser.
In the laser.
Is what I'm talking about.
I see.
And it's pretty dramatic. And this kind of leads into the discussion about college sailing. And I think if we want a medal in the laser class in the future, it's not going to come from a college sailor, because these guys from a very young age are going full time. And in terms of Australia and other countries, they get their degree on the road. So they only show up to class once.
This isn't just laser sailing. The argument has, and I get it, has long been that college sailing has been ruining. It's so popular, and high school sailing, because what you learn in college, I was a good college sailor with Bruce Nelson in Michigan. We won virtually everything there was to win. But we also sail lots of other boats all the time and yada yada. But now the specialty of high school sailing and then college sailing, and they learn to do 2 things: start and pump and rock and ooch.
I was pretty neutral until just recently.
Really? So what do you think?
Well, I was neutral because Anna, came out of Old Dominion with honors, and she ended up winning a gold medal. But because of the experience and what I see in the laser class in particular, and how I know these other countries deal with it, I agree with that last statement, which is I think high school sailing, you get the same experience of, aggressive boat handling, short course, kind of all these skills that you'd have in college, you get in high school sailing. So there's no added benefit, and as you can imagine, there's probably a detraction because you've lost 4 years of international competition, and then developing your fitness and the mental side of it, the experience.
Okay, well, what about, shall we talk while we're on laser? Let's talk about the ILCA, the laser class itself. You're just back from Melbourne and the conclave of world laser sailors and the class and the world championship, and the news that the lower section of the mast is now going to, the upper section you can see, even I think in this photo, they have been carbon, and now the lower section is going to be carbon.
Well, let me just comment on this slide.
Yeah.
I love this slide because that's my guy on the very left-hand side, Chris Barnard, and we worked very hard on starting.
He's poked.
He is poked. So that was part of our
Julie,
system.
that's not. This is a family show. That is not a sexual expression.
Thank you.
Or that's not a meat. He's not poking somebody. He is poked. That's a term of art in sailing. When you get your bow forward of the fleet and you get off the line just slightly ahead of the people around you, you're poked.
So if I'm gonna coach you, it's non-negotiable. You are going to be an expert starter.
And how many times are you going to be OCS?
He was really good at not getting black flags. He was really good. And he, if he decides to be a coach one day, he'll be able to transfer that knowledge.
Okay. So what about the lower? What about the carbon lower?
I don't.
Is that good for the class? Does it matter?
The carbon upper section actually increased the overall weight of the
range or the weight needed.
The crew weight.
The ideal weight.
Yeah, the sailor weight, and it didn't quite pump as much and open the leach as much
as the old aluminum section.
Yeah, I don't think the bottom section is going to have as big an impact, but it probably will. So we're just going to have to see how that goes. The other concern I had was that the gooseneck is still riveted into the mast. And you'd really want a composite gooseneck because
so is a stainless gooseneck that's drive rivets into the
rivets. Yeah.
Oh man.
So that would be a concern, and as well as the Vang fitting. Is that just going to create another?
But they must have tested that extensively.
Oh yeah, must have.
Oh,
absolutely tested it.
Okay, well, so you don't think the carbon lower section is going to make that big a difference?
We have to see. We have to see. It does make sense to go that way because it's, the aluminum, I think the bottom sections were pretty well controlled.
And what about we should stop here because there's a whole bunch of laser-specific comments.
Yeah.
Julie, let me grab a couple of them. And John Emmett is saying Tansi, the Croatian.
Yeah.
I want to meet him. He's got a cool name. Tansi Stepanovic.
Yeah.
Love his name. Croatia won the start if you see the sequence 6 seconds later. Which one is Tansi? Is Stepanovic? CRO, I can't see it. Emmett must be coaching him. He's chiming in here. Right. John.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Dina Devoti is watching. Say hi to our dear friend Luca, who's running for vice president.
And is going to be a licensed builder, apparently. Of the laser. Exciting news.
One can only hope.
Yeah.
Gerardo Seeliger, who's running for president of
friend.
World Sailing and a Finn sailor and president emeritus of the Finn class,
Yep.
and he was president of the 49er class for a while.
Yeah. He's
So
got my vote.
He has got my vote too, unless somebody else even cooler than Gerardo comes along. But he announced on this show on TFE Live, as did Luca. And I think it's great. And I think both of them will be good. Ben Remmacher saying the new masts are the same geometry and bend as the current mast, but quite a few updates to construction method, fittings, etc. Now, Ben's not involved in the laser class directly, but he, of course, knows what's going on.
Probably does.
Julia, what other comments? Jay Hanfield, the world needs more sailors. Sailing is like no other sport, no matter the harbor. A sailor is welcomed by other sailors. It's a bond that knows the love of the sport is stronger than the borders or hate. Long live sailing. I couldn't agree more. And Jay, who had some personal challenges, Julie, as you know, we got to get him on the show too because he's writing quite extensively. He was abused as a kid, sexually abused, and he has written quite extensively about it. And we got to get him on the show because he says sailing saved his life, literally. Mm-hmm. Cool guy.
Nice.
And Andrew Pimentel is watching. Hello, Andrew.
Hey.
Nice to see you. Long time. John Emmett is also saying that you, John, JB, did great stuff for Hannah Snellgrove,
yeah.
And she made the top 10 in the worlds last year. She's a radial sailor.
Well, she's the sailor that I had adopted and put her back into the sport. And
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was one of those situations that I saw her out on the water, and I walked up to her on shore and I said, "Who the heck are you? And why haven't we seen you?" And great person.
Here is a question from Dick Loomis. JB, what is the current health of the U.S. sailing program since Malcolm left? Was that a net gain? I mean, you may not want to comment on that, but was losing Malcolm a net gain or a net loss or neutral?
It's really hard to comment on that. I know that, first off, he was bringing a culture to the team and a perspective that was kind of outside the bubble, and that was exciting. And it's not often that you see a sport, lose a performance director 10 months before the Olympics.
Oh yes.
And the deputy director too, Greg Fisher.
Yeah.
Who went the week before.
Yeah, and so that certainly doesn't bode well in terms of our getting ready for 2020. But the most important thing at this point is to give as much support to the sailors as we can. And it's just we've had 4 performance directors in the last 3 quads.
Mm-hmm. So, and of course, we're building for the future regardless. You have to. All countries do. All programs have to build for the future.
Yeah.
Think longer term.
Yeah.
Max Hunt is saying, why is the word cancellation being used instead of postponement? And I fully agree. I mean, we shouldn't be, for the sake of these sailors, and I don't like the word athletes. Peter Houston and others don't like the word, they're sailors. We're yacht racers. We're racing sailors. And of course, they're athletes. They're fantastic athletes as well. And people look at sailing and they think, oh, it's a bunch of people out there having a gin and tonic before they go sailing, and then a dark and stormy after they come in, and maybe with a Thurston Howell III sailing cap on. And of course, it's not true. And these Olympians are all fabulously conditioned physically and mentally. And the great thing I'll say about the sport, JB, and the sport we've all loved and we've grown up in, Julie agrees with me, it's not for everybody. And I think a mistake we make in promoting the sport, oh yeah, come sailing, it's a great sport, it's for everybody. It's not any more than chess is a sport for it is for anybody. We don't discriminate, at least not much, and not much anymore. Yeah. There's still some problems in some parts of the sport, but it's a great sport. But you've got to be willing to be, even in recreationally, you got to be physically fit and mentally fit. It's not easy to sail, and we keep selling it as a sport that is easy to sail, and it's not. Motorboating's easy.
However,
who
made that comment? Who was the person that?
Max Hunt.
Okay.
No, John M. Max Hunt is. Yeah. So that was cancellation. Well, that's my comment.
But about the sport.
Yeah.
When I was in Australia, first you look at the UK, and they've got clubs in little ponds, and they've got sailing all over the country. In Australia, when I went down there, when I first got down there, they had a day to learn, introduce sailing to the general public. And each club, it was all part of their national program. Yeah. Each club for a weekend had set it up so they had these keel boats, they had these dinghies, they had barbecues, they had bouncy tents, they had all this. It was national. So all over the country this one weekend, and I happened to experience it at the Sandringham Yacht Club, which is a great club, a royal club,
Royal Sandringham,
Royal Club, and it was amazing. And they've got a fleet of keel boats like we have here, the J boats, and
the J22s at St. Francis,
and they were putting life jackets on them and marching them down. There were actually keel boats as well that were taking people out, as well as the dinghies and the kids, and so it's possible, and so there's so much to talk about in that front, but how do you get that started? And I think that's the other question, so that's really was exciting to see it down there, and I would love to see that happen here, to kind of have a national day. And maybe it's a couple days because of the difference in weather in California.
Julia, can't you organize that too? I mean, we got a national pizza day. We've got a national just about everything else day. And they do have this thing called sailstice, summer sailstice,
right?
Yeah.
Which John Arndt or the Latitude 38 guys, I can't remember, here on the Bay have started that, I think, and then have tried to promote that across the country on a weekend closest to the summer solstice.
We have to figure out how to ease boat owners' fears of somebody getting hurt, because the insurance for that is really strange.
Well, true, and the sport is also it's a bit risky.
But the other thing is they have these banners displayed in front of the club for a month, and the dynamic is that people see it every day on the way to work or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's
Yeah.
not like
It's a neat program.
it is a
Yeah.
really great program.
And it
Yes.
gives an image of the sport of being completely open and inviting, and even though it's a Royal Yacht Club or it's the St. Francis or it's the whatever, hey, you're welcome to come in here and do this and join our sport, even if they don't.
Yeah.
You know, they get the idea that they can. Again, I think our whole approach is wrong. We say, oh, sailing is really easy. Everybody can do it. And they go out once and they say, screw this with a capital F. This is too hard. No one warned me it's going to be cold and, you know, I might get my fingers wrapped up in a winch. And, you know, you got to say, hey, only you people who are smart and physically fit and want to come try one of the most challenging sports in the world, because if you don't know how to do it, if you don't do it well, you can hurt yourself, hurt somebody else, or worse.
And if you do learn, you can do it for the rest of your life and enjoy it.
And I think the other point that JB made and Julia, you make over and over again is that the point of learning to sail and going sailing, yeah, some people get the sense of freedom and you're out on the water and having great fun with great people and cool people, not even necessarily great people. I don't know what that means, but it's the social activity before and after. It's a social activity in the boat.
Yes.
We have more fun on this. It's okay. Somebody asked me about that hat. You did, I guess. The It's Okay team, which is the Andrews 50 that we race in down Newport Beach. And it's, yeah, we race and we sail pretty well and win a few regattas, but it's the social component. But back to the Olympics, bottom line, JB, we have a shot at how many medals?
Well, right now, kind of based on that analysis, which is based on data, I think our best prospect is the FX.
Anna and Maggie.
Yeah.
So we should also really help raise some money for them so they maximize their chances.
And you have to recognize also Kilroy is the sponsor of that team. And it's such a great partnership because they're all about innovation and technology and competition. And Steph and Maggie have demonstrated that's what their program's all about as well. And so if there's anyone out there that has a contact with a potential sponsor for the team, or if they want to do a direct donation, you know, the goal is to let's get them funded sooner than later so that they can just, you know, put their program. It's only 4.5 months until they show up.
It's like Dixon when he raised all the money for our campaign, our 2007 America's Cup campaign. You get all the money ahead of you, then you can really, you know what your budget is, and you don't have to worry about that. You don't worry about, you know, you can make your plan. So here it is. I put it up on the screen again for the two. It's www, obviously, Roble Shea, ROBLE Shea, sailing.com/donate. And I think everybody would be grateful. In fact, for the others as well who are making it. But I think John's made a pretty good case for why these two Can we stop calling it the 49er FX and just call it the FX?
I call it the FX.
Just the FX. If Ben Remacher's watching, we'll ask his permission to do that.
And the other benefit of joining their team is you get to go along for the ride. So
good point.
We'll be putting out reports. The media is going to be increased, and it's going to be a fantastic adventure.
Have we gotten them teed up to come on the show yet? We've made the offer, I know.
Yeah, they're busy. They're finalizing their plans, but as soon as they're free,
good.
If you can deal with Skype.
Yep.
Well, most of our guests come on by Skype. I mean, Lily Zhu, who was on from London the other day, it was as good a picture. It was network quality video and really audio. She was on her, I don't know what computer it was, but in fact, Julia, I said I was going to call her and find out because it was really, really good.
Her sound was really good too.
And of course, she's got a little bit of a broadcast background now. Yep. She's gone to first Southampton University, now Solent University, getting a master's degree in communications or broadcasting or something. She's going to be terrific, as are a lot of our Olympians. John, Paul Henderson made the point when he was last on the show. He said, you know, one thing that is cool about our sport is that the Olympics is not the pinnacle necessarily. It's not the end. It is a pinnacle for sure, but it's not the end of your career. And most people do the Olympics, maybe medal, maybe not. And then they go on to SailGP, the America's Cup. I mean, you look at all the people who are celebrated in the Star Sailors League and SailGP and even, I mean, probably less so in the TP52 circuit because there tend to be more offshore and less Olympians. But certainly the America's Cup, everybody's, oh, Olympic here, Olympic there. And it's a stepping stone.
And they can come back as masters as well.
And come back as a master in any of those classes.
Yeah.
Okay. Andrew Dolly Davola has said that was Andrew Buckland.
Yeah, Andrew, fantastic.
On
Thanks
the Buck.
for that.
We have the smartest group of FOSI on here.
Absolutely.
They are global. And, of course, Andrew Pindar went to bed because he's in the UAE. It's where it's late, now 3 in the morning. And then John Emmett was saying the question is probably referring to the U.S. 49er FX teams, the FX teams. He's saying the question is probably if both teams campaign for 2024, that's the real winner, right? To keep them both going.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we understand the challenges, and I'm really interested to, pursue the solutions. And
that's a good statement.
And that's really what it's all about, because I don't know if you're aware, but there's going to be some event in 28 down in, I don't know,
down in Long Beach,
Santa Ana or someplace.
You think?
Compton.
John Sangmeister is listening, or John Shadden's listening. They will not be amused.
Yeah. So in Long Beach, which can, if you come full circle, we won a gold or a silver in every event. And it started, when you have, success, people want to support that, and people look up to it. And what's great about, what we experienced with Steph and Maggie is that's an inspirational story for anyone that really wants to do an Olympic campaign. What an incredible performance.
Indeed. JB, Julia, while we've been gas bagging away here, look at this.
I just did, yeah.
Thank you, too. Who sent that? Somebody sent that link to us.
I think Jay.
Jay Hanfield? So, I think there was the hope. We all hoped.
Oh, John Shaffer.
Oh, John Shaffer. Now, John Shaffer is going to come on the show, too. He is a guy who works, let me just say he works in and around Washington, D.C., but he is a bit of an international man of mystery. Who was last week he was in Malawi, and the week before that he was in some godforsaken place doing all sorts of negotiations, and he is very switched on with the CDC and WHO and government agencies, so he knows when something like this happens. This is our mayor here. Amid intensifying worldwide concern about the spread of the new coronavirus, the new virus, Julia, the virus. Mayor London Breed declared a state of emergency for San Francisco Tuesday, which will ramp up the city's efforts to prepare for and confront potential cases. Well, you think while they're at it, they'll deal with the poop on the human excrement on the sidewalks and you guys laugh, and the needles, and I mean, it's astonishing, but that's another issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully this is all being overblown, and that it's not as serious. That's what you got to hope for.
Yeah. Has anyone either at the America's Cup or IOC spoken of target timelines for final call?
Well, here's what I do know. Again, I know that the discussion is going on with the government authorities in Italy right now between the Challenger of Record, as I said at the top of the show, and whether or not they are going to be required, what the Italian government's going to do to limit immigration, basically, limit people coming into the country in the very near future. And that would put an end to, if they do say, sorry, we're going to have to close the border on some basis. Well, we'll let you sailors in, your yacht racers in. Right. Yeah, they're not going to do that. You're not going to make exceptions. So either that's going to happen or not. With the IOC now, with Dick Pound calling for the Olympics, I'm going to leave Maggie and their Steph's donate up there in the lower third. If the IOC now is, obviously there's a call from an IOC member to call it off and postpone whatever it is. I also know that the Genoa World Sailing has issued a statement saying that they will announce by March 1st, which is just in 4 days, 29, 5 days. This is a leap year, right? So that we have the 29th.
Yeah.
So that's 4 days, and then on March 1st is in 5 days. They're going to announce whether the Genoa World Cup Regatta is going to happen. And bottom line, there's a lot of things are now going to start to get affected, even in, as I said, in the last I had to redo this show because of the coronavirus making that the B block.
Steve Groover says, I hear it's now being transmitted via the internet, the ultimate virus.
Well, no, the transmission is, I mean, I don't know what to believe and what not to believe. I'm going to move off of this slide here and we go back to where we were, review of some of the gang. But John, the transmission is a worry because it looks like you're communicable before you express symptoms.
Right.
You are communicable after you've been cured. That's the wrong word, but after you've gone through, the disease has progressed and the symptoms have gone away, but apparently you're still carrying it and I saw a disturbing report this is not fake news, from a credible news source, so that you can continue to it's a contagion. So I guess bottom line, it's not that bad, but it takes only one small, when if it mutates, then we are screwed with a capital F, big picture, long term. And the fact that the CDC said today, guys, they said prepare for significant, I think was the wording they used, significant disruption. And your glasses are tapping on your microphone.
Sorry about that,
Julia. I like your headset, though. I think it works well.
It does. It's relatively new, and it works really well.
It's just every now and then, she's tapping it. So like she's sending Morse code.
Are you listening?
Okay, let's get to the final segment here. And apologies again to, I taped a nice segment with Jody Shields, but we knew we're almost 3 hours in now, and we're going to, but I will run that because we're almost 2 hours in. Thank you. Almost 3 o'clock. But SailGP is happening apparently in Sydney this weekend. We hope it is. And there is a nice video that they have done recapping the 2019 season as a preview for what is going to happen this year with an extra event and an extra team. I mean, a new team, a 7th team. Have a look.
Australia is the 2019
That's Jody. We can hear his voice.
Very close contact.
Hello and welcome to the first ever SailGP event.
Here we go, boys. Hang on. Let's get going here.
Goodness, how close that is.
Not on day one, boys.
Race one, won by the Japanese.
I like it. Send it, lick it, stamp it.
These boats are just magic, watching them fly.
The first time we've seen the fastest class of racing boats out on the water 6 up.
And again, very, very close.
We got it. We've been bouncing off ping pong.
The French did not go through the finish line.
They missed the finish. How do you do that?
What a race they have sailed. The Australians with their 3rd win of the event. And then there were 2.
Go, 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 go hard. Come on, guys.
And fittingly, the colours of this inaugural SailGP in Sydney are green and gold.
It's unbelievable for me. This is the first time I've represented Australia since the London Olympics, and I'm stoked to get the same result.
There's a good sailor, Tommy Slingsby. So, gang, that regatta is this Saturday and Sunday, which is our Friday and Saturday here in the U.S. of A. in the excited states, as some of our friends in Canada call us, and elsewhere. John, Julia, let's go out on the line here. This is the first regatta. We know that we've got Ben Ainsley, Sir Ben Ainsley, coming in, their team having bought the British SailGP team. First regatta in Sydney, home waters for Tommy Slingsby. Can you see anyone else winning other than Slingsby this weekend?
Ainsley.
You think?
Well, did he win a gold or silver in the laser there? And he's a fin sailor, so it's going to be Ainsley.
You think Ainsley's going to win, Julia?
I don't know.
Come on. This is Fat Tuesday. It's time
I've,
to have. We're going to have a cocktail tonight.
You could gang up and say Ainsley.
Well, because it's Sydney, I have to go with Aussies because they have a lot of onshore support.
Yeah, I think Slingsby's going to be good, and I think he knows the boats, and they're all down there. Though a lot of people think that the U.S. team, that Rome Kirby's team, is much improved because of Kimo Worthington, who has joined that team now as the general manager, as the campaign leader, and of course Kimo is you know Kimo well.
Yeah, very.
And
very
he's been
capable.
he's very capable, bright guy, and won a lot of events himself, and as a manager, as a campaign manager as well. So I still think that the U.S. team's going to struggle, and we'll see how they do. But we'll see. Rome Kirby was at the bottom of the list last year, at the bottom. But I think Slingers. I'm with Julia. I think Slingers, Tommy Slingsby, will win. But it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how Ben does and how his British team. And of course, he has brought the wing trimmer, the flight controller, wing trimmer, flight controller, who was Nathan Outeridge's on Nathan Outeridge's boat on Team Japan, and that may hurt Outeridge and help Ben Ainsley. So we'll see, because he's with his America's Cup team. That's Goobs.
Yeah, Goobs. So the great thing about being an American in Australia is your weekends are 3 days long during football season. Because you got Saturday and Sunday, and then on Monday you have Sunday football in the States.
So you take Monday in Australia off so you can watch football.
Exactly.
What if you're a college football fan? See, we're college football fans. Julia watches Stanford, and I watch Michigan. Okay, JB, Julia, anything else for the good of the order?
Yes. I have to say, please don't forget to read the comments. We have lots of them, and there's some interesting ideas in it, and no bashes that I've seen. So
we have a great group. I mean, John, we go back. Julia goes back. She's watching throughout if somebody comes on, and we don't allow personal attacks. We don't allow name calling. We don't allow coarse language. And I haven't seen anything. And remember, everybody, you can comment if you're watching this in replay. We leave, because we trust our FOSI, we trust our friends of Sailing Illustrated. We leave comments open. A lot of such shows don't, because you get idiots on here that come on and say, "Oh, that Bertrand, he's a whatting a-hole and all this kind of," or that Ehman, he's a Crutonic.
Have a business opportunity to $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. And those kinds of things show up too. But we all know we can ignore that. But Julia goes through, and I go through, and we keep watching. So do look at the comments. Yeah. If you're so inclined, please do
like, share, and subscribe.
Indeed. That helps us a lot. Or go back to the main website, sailingillustrated.com, and become a patron via Patreon. Some people give us $1 a month. Some people give us 10. Some people give us as much as $1,000 a month to help support this, and
it does.
And it does. I mean, it gives us a nice studio and an apartment here in the marina, and keeps the light and heat on. And we appreciate very much your support. Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you come Friday. We can't do Sail, at least so far. I've not been able to get SailGP to allow us to do a watch party like we did for one of the Sydney event last year. They got all fussed and upset. But do download their app, regardless of what happens. Download their app. Jody Shields is going to be on the bay. You know Jody, right,
yeah, he's
John?
A great guy.
Terrific guy.
Yeah.
And great announcer.
Yeah, he is.
And it's too bad he got cut, because he was doing play-by-play last year, but they were flying him to London for every regatta to sit in a studio. Yeah. Along with Shirley Robertson, who apparently also has been dropped, and that's too bad, because I thought the two of them were terrific.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, get the app, SailGP app. It works on both Android and on iPhones. Download it. Jody will be on the water in Sydney Harbor, and if it goes well, and if there are a lot of likes and so on, and views, I guess Jody will go to each of the regattas, and it's so much better to have commentary on the water,
much better,
than in a sound studio sitting here watching TV screens. Yeah. It's not correct. Okay, anything else?
Nice to have John here again.
Yeah, John, thank you very much indeed.
Great to be here.
Great to have you here. Thank you. Okay, everybody, hope to see you on Friday, same time, same channel. In the meantime, sail safe, sail fast, and have fun. Ciao. Bye.
Bye.